Welcome, and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's conference. At that time, you may press star one, unmute your phone, and record your name to ask a question. I would like to inform all parties that today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the conference over to your host, Mr. Josh Finch. Thank you. You may begin.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Finch with NASA's Office of Communications. We're here to discuss NASA's SpaceX 26 commercial resupply mission to the International Space Station. Following today's launch readiness review, launch is now targeted for Tuesday, November 22nd, and senior representatives are here to talk more about the review. Today we have Joe Montalbano, Manager, International Space Station Program, Kirt Costello, Chief Scientist, NASA's International Space Station Program, Sarah Walker, Director, Dragon Mission Management at SpaceX, and Mike McAleenen, Launch Weather Officer for Cape Canaveral Space Force Station's 45th Weather Squadron. We'll start with opening comments from each of our speakers, and then we'll take media questions. First, I'll go to Joe Montalbano. Joe?
Hey, thank you, Josh, and thank you for joining us today. Another busy week on board the International Space Station. Just this past week on Tuesday, Josh Cassada and Frank Rubio were outside working to install support hardware for the third set of augmented solar arrays that we'll be delivering to the International Space Station next year. And on Thursday, just yesterday, we had two of our Russian cosmonauts outside doing a spacewalk working on a radiator that will be moved to the MLM module. And so, again, busy times on board the International Space Station. With that work behind us, we're now focusing on SpaceX 26. As Josh mentioned, out of the launch readiness review earlier today, we are targeting launch on the 22nd at 3:54 Eastern. That sets us up for a docking to the Zenith port of the International Space Station on the 23rd at 6:30 Eastern in the morning, and then hatch opening about 90 minutes later or so. And so, again, looking forward to this mission. It's scheduled to deliver approximately 7,700 pounds of science and research, cargo, and supplies to the International Space Station. Of critical importance to us is the two new solar arrays that we'll be doing spacewalks at the end of November and early December to install and deploy on board the International Space Station. In addition to the two solar arrays that will be delivering on SpaceX 26, we have some life support equipment being delivered, some GPS hardware, some exercise hardware, and some medical equipment. This mission will stay docked to the International Space Station about 45 days. Generally, SpaceX missions are about 30 days. This is a little longer, 15 days longer. And it's in order to have time to do the EVAs for the solar array install and keep our science requirements that are critical to the International Space Station. So all in all, we're looking for an exciting mission. And with that, let me hand it over to Dr. Costello. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Since 2017 and our transition to 4-crew operations on the U.S. orbital segment, we've seen an 87% increase in our yearly publication rate from ISS research. That's a truly significant increase. And those publications are landing in more impactful journals with a 300% increase to the top quartile journal publication counts, as reported by Clarivate Analytics. We are thankful to our researchers who publish their results and continue to build up the knowledge of fundamental and applied sciences in space. So as we look forward to launching SpaceX 26 next week, NASA is thankful for the support from the international space research community as we seek to maximize the science return from our amazing multidisciplinary laboratory in space. We're also thankful to our crew members who dedicate their time, bodies, and taste buds to our science. On SpaceX 26, we're bringing a set of unique and interesting experiments to the space station. First up, NASA's Human Research Program will be launching the VEGO-5 investigation. This experiment is a continuation of their pick-and-eat salad crop productivity nutritional value, and acceptability series. They're expanding the crop variety to dwarf tomatoes with this investigation, and it focuses on the impact of light quality and fertilizer on fruit production, microbial food safety, nutritional value, taste acceptability by the crew, and the overall behavioral health benefits of having plants and fresh food in space. On the heels of our Artemis 1 launch, NASA Johnson Space Center will be flying the Moon Microscope investigation. The goal of this project is to develop and test a blood staining system and a miniaturized microscope for medical research support of future lunar orbit and surface missions. There are no current diagnostic capabilities available for future missions related to hematology. The newly developed hardware has other potential applications related to lunar surface analysis of food and water contamination, and materials hardware analysis. The ISS National Lab will be flying research from the Houston Methodist Research Institute to test a novel remotely controlled drug delivery implant that could one day provide extended adjustable medication for patients who need daily medicine but lack medical access, even those on spacecraft headed to Mars. This investigation builds on previous ISS results on microchannelized drug delivery and will fly as an automated experiment using the Faraday Research Facility developed by Proxops LLC. The ISS National Lab is also sponsoring a wide array of student research in the NanoRacks Module 51 investigation. The NanoRacks National Center for Earth and Space Science Education Ranger, SSEP Mission 16, contains 26 microgravity experiments designed by students in grades 5 through 12 and at the college undergraduate level. These investigations assess the role of microgravity in various physical, chemical, and biological systems. And just in time for Thanksgiving, these student investigations will look at many of the different aspects near and dear to the hearts of Thanksgiving celebrants, with research into carrots, quinoa, rice, blueberries, purslane, sunflowers, basil, radishes, mushrooms, yeast, and many of the processes surrounding the breakdown and processing of nutrients from these species. This is a real cornucopia of student experiments. Our JAXA International partner is also flying an experiment to spice things up with the Small Payload Support Equipment Facility. It can mount up to 8 payloads and transport them via the Japanese experiment module airlock for deployment. It attaches to the IVA replaceable Small Exposed Experiment Platform, or ICEP, a GEM exposed facility platform on the exterior of the space station. The European Space Agency completes our list of highlights today with their investigation, Suture in Space. Suture in Space investigates the behavior of sutured wounds and the mechanisms of tissue repair and regeneration in microgravity. Studying the complex models and the hardware developed to perform this experiment on the International Space Station allows for researchers to measure the mechanical forces at the wound site, monitor the wound closure, and study the mechanics involved in the tissue repair in a microgravity environment. We look forward to our researchers' results and any tips on stuffing next year's turkey as well. Now over to Sarah Walker.
Thanks, Kirt. I'm glad to be here too, as we're in final preparations to launch SpaceX's 26th cargo resupply mission to the International Space Station. 22 has been an exciting year for Dragon missions. We safely launched and returned 4 Dragon spacecraft to and from the ISS. So the launch of CRS-26 will be our 5th Dragon of 2022. You may recall we brought in the new year, bringing the 24th cargo mission home after it launched to ISS last December. Then in April, we launched a historic Axiom 1 commercial astronaut mission to the space station. Its crew spent 17 days on board the orbiting laboratory before coming home. And then 2 days after they safely splashed down, Falcon 9 launched Dragon and Crew 4, NASA's Crew 4 astronaut, to the space station. So Crew 4 and the already orbiting Crew 3 completed a 10-day handover of their ISS responsibilities before Dragon and Crew 3 returned home in early May. Then in July, we launched CRS-25, and in early October, we launched Crew 5 to the space station with another crew handover like the one I described. There was about 9 days where the crew handed over, and then Crew 4 and Dragon returned safely home, while Crew 5 remains on orbit today. So here we are with our last Dragon mission of the year, CRS-26. So Joel mentioned we just had the launch readiness review an hour or two ago here earlier this morning. So there's a couple things our teams are working coming out of that review that I think are worth mentioning. The first is that during Crew 4's return to Earth last month, a piece of foreign object debris, or FOD as we call it in the industry, was observed when Dragon's main parachutes were deployed. So there was no indication that this FOD came into contact with the parachutes or Dragon. The parachutes performed nominally. Dragon safely splashed down off the coast of Florida. But I think this is a great example of SpaceX's commitment to constantly improving and ensuring our parachute system is the safest in the industry. We're fortunate to have so many imagery sources to cover our flights. We've got onboard cameras in the parachute bay. We've got cameras on the recovery boat in multiple spectrums, infrared, visible. We've got cameras on support planes flying nearby. And so our engineers noticed this object during their extensive review of all this imagery post-flight. So we looked into it. After subsequent investigation, the object was identified as an aluminum press tool that was left in one of our 4 main parachute deployment bags after hydraulically compressing the parachute into that bag prior to flight. So our parachute vendors identified multiple factors that may have contributed to this, and they've immediately initiated corrective actions as a result. They've been tremendous partners as NASA and SpaceX together work through this investigation. We also reviewed X-ray footage and masses of the individual parachutes for both Crew 5 and CRS-26, just to ensure that we don't have a similar issue on those near-term flights. So we are flight ready for this item, and we'll work closely with the parachute vendor and NASA to ensure that the new processes are implemented on all future missions. The second is a little bit emergent. It was a leak that we discovered a few days ago in one of our thermal control system loops from the onboard data that we monitored during ground processing. So we were watching data on the vehicle as it arrives at the hangar and continues processing ahead of launch, and we detected elevated levels of a certain constituent in our cabin atmosphere. So we're able to narrow it down and confirm it was FluTech, which is a fluid that we use in our thermal control system that provides cooling for the interior. And we isolated the issue to a single flange. It wasn't seated properly because there's a damaged rubber seal in there. And so we offloaded fluid from this loop. We reworked the joint. This is all in the last 24 to 48 hours. And we're currently reloading new fluid into the system. So happy to say we're flight ready on that one as well once we get the new fluid loaded back in. So Dragon's currently at 39A. As I mentioned, it's preparing to be mated to the Falcon 9, and it's progressing well through all the other standard pre-launch processing ahead of rollout this weekend. Unfortunately, that rework I mentioned on the thermal control system, it did put us about a shift behind the T0 time on the 21st. So you heard Josh and Joel mention we made the decision at LRR to go ahead and adjust our plans to target the opportunity on the 22nd instead. And we are also targeting additional backup opportunities this weekend on the 26th and 27th, pending range approval. Weather's not looking great for Tuesday, though, I'll say, so I'm hoping Mike will pull off a miracle for us. But our teams will continue to monitor the weather as we head into launch. I'm excited to say this is actually the last new cargo Dragon spacecraft that we plan to build. This takes the Dragon fleet up to a total of 7 vehicles. And then with NASA recently securing 8 more commercial crew missions, and that takes us out through Crew 14, along with our exciting commercial human spaceflight manifest, we've recently decided to build 1 more crew spacecraft as well. So that will round out our fleet to 3 cargo and 5 Dragon vehicles to carry us into the future, make sure we can support as many flights as our customers want to fly with us. So as always, I'd like to end by thanking NASA, ISS, and the 45th for supporting this launch. And I especially want to acknowledge all the Florida-based teams that have been dealing with multiple hurricanes in the last month. My heart goes out to anyone who's been affected by Hurricane Nicole, and you all have done an incredible job on a hard work of spaceflight in very challenging circumstances. And then finally, happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Here's hoping Joel maybe tucked away a Thanksgiving treat on board for the crew. I don't know. Over to you, Mike.
All right. Well, thanks. Yes, I hope everybody has enjoyed the last couple of days in Central Florida. It's been spectacular. And unfortunately, as you allude to, it's all about to change. I think we're We're having a kind of a system spin up in the western Gulf of Mexico. Going to start spewing a whole bunch of moisture across the Gulf into Florida Peninsula, probably starting late tomorrow. And then by Sunday, pretty thick clouds are expected and some showers start to form. And that really kind of lingers in until probably just around Thanksgiving, when we might see beginnings of a break, and a really it's going to be just kind of a little bit of a slog for a while. Just going to stay in this kind of messy pattern until a big front comes through and clears us out after Thanksgiving. So what we're looking at for launch day now is just lots of clouds. So a thick cloud layer rule is certainly in play. We'll have some showers, so the cumulus cloud rule, and because the Dragon has a thermal protection, no fly-through precipitation. So that will be problem that we would be monitoring on the countdown. Right now, we're looking for a 70% probability of violation due to all those rules and others, just because it's going to be just quite of a messy day. But that leaves us 30% chance of not having any of those things happen. So what we need is those breaks that will exist in the weather to kind of line up with our instantaneous launch window. So there's always a chance that'll happen. So that's what we're hoping for, and we'll see what we can do to make sure those all align just perfectly. And that's all I have. Back to you, Josh.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to the rest of the speakers for those updates. And we'll now turn it over to the media question and answer portion. And first question we'll have today is from Jeff Faust at Space News.
Good afternoon. Question for Sarah. I just wanted to confirm that if you're not able to launch Tuesday, the backup dates would be the 26th and the 27th, I think you said. And then also, was there any examination of whatever the booster issue that prompted the delay of the Falcon 9 Starlink launch from Vandenberg that was scheduled for today? I know you guys are standing down for a few days for that. Any extra checks that you're planning on the Falcon 9 for the CRS launch because of that? Thanks.
Hey, you're correct, Jeff. The 26th and 27th are the next backup opportunities, and I believe that's pending range approval. I'm not sure if we've been approved yet, but those are feasible days. And then to answer your second question, the Falcon 9 for CRS-26 is healthy.
All right, and our next question is from Stephen Clark at Spaceflight Now.
Thanks. I think my questions are for Sarah as well. There's a reason you can't launch Wednesday, Thursday, Friday due to the FAA's HARP airspace release program. Is that what's preventing any launches occurring during those days? And also, if I know you have another launch for Eutelsat, I think it's Sunday night. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if that delayed into early next week due to these weather issues, could you support two launches on the same day? I think about 6 hours apart. Thanks.
Hey, yeah, there are multiple factors that we have been working with the NASA teams. Holiday air traffic restriction, as you mentioned, is one that complicates flying during the Thanksgiving holiday. We also have to look at orbital mechanics and the duration of the transit. And we have to make sure we add in some time after a handful of attempts for the NASA teams to refresh cargo if need be. So there's a lot of things that we juggle for sure. Driving the 26th being the next good opportunity for us. Could you repeat your second question? I apologize.
Yeah, I know you have a Eutelsat launch also on your manifest in the next few days. I think it's Sunday night, but the weather is iffy for that at best as well. If that slipped into Monday, Tuesday, could you support the CRS and the Eutelsat launches on the same day? Thanks.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, so there are different pads. We can utilize different control rooms and different personnel. And so we've worked together with our various customers on the minimum spacing between launches. But yes, we could support both launches on the same day off of the two different pads.
And our next question will be from Gina Sinceri at ABC News.
This is for Kirt Costello. How psychologically, how important is it for this expanding repertoire of vegetables to the cruise affair?
You came in just a little bit garbled, but I think the question was, how important is it to continue this expanding repertoire of vegetable analysis? And it is fairly important to our exploration goals at NASA to be able to sustain the crew with not only nutrition, but also to look at various types of plants as sources for nutrients that would be hard pressed to either sustain the long trips between distant destinations like Mars and so forth in the future. It's important to look at different types of vegetables, not only because of how they promote different growing mediums, requirements for the hardware. Different root zones require different heights, different capabilities to grow more larger harvests of those vegetables, but also because they interact differently with the microbiome on board. And understanding the beneficial nutrients and microbes they interact with, and how to best supply the soil type and the fertilizers required for these vegetables is important. One of the big goals of the tomato study in Veg-05 is to really understand the optimization of fertilizers and nutrients for those fruits.
Thank you. And as a reminder to media, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *1 on your phone into the queue. And our next question is from Will Robinson-Smith at Spectrum News 13.
Yes, hi. Thanks for taking the question, and happy early Thanksgiving to everyone. Question for Sarah regarding the new cargo Dragon. Does SpaceX know when it anticipates to debut that? Will that be for a NASA crew mission or for a private mission? And then question for Joel. Can you give us a little tease of what the Thanksgiving goodness will be for the crew on station come Thursday? Thanks.
Hey, so this is the last cargo mission. I think you meant crew mission. I'm sorry. This is the last cargo spacecraft, this CRS-26 flight. The additional crew capsule that we are building right now should be ready in the 2024 timeframe. So we'll work with all of our customers on what flight makes sense for its first flight, but sometime in 2024.
And let's see, for gifts for the crew, we're flying up some special food for them. So we'll have some frozen treats, some ice cream for the crew. We'll have some Thanksgiving type foods such as some spicy green beans, cran-apple desserts, almonds, pumpkin pie, candy corn, just a number of items. In addition, our standard food menu allows them to have, everything that we'd be eating on Thanksgiving, mashed potatoes, candied yams, mac and cheese for those who want mac and cheese for Thanksgiving. So we're going to get those guys fed very well for Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Joe. And our next question is from Mike Maidenberg at the Wall Street Journal.
Hey there. Sarah, I had a question about the Dragon fleet as well, and kind of the stability, that in it that you're planning, with those 8 combined between cargo and crew. Why keep it like that? Is that sort of based on demand? Does that relate to other, company investments in Starship or other programs? Could you just talk about why you're going to be sort of stable, so to speak, on Dragon for a while, it sounds like? Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can attribute most of that stability to our increasing reuse counts on each capsule. So, like you said, we look at demand of our current customers, current contracted flights, what we forecast the future might hold. And right now, both the crew and cargo Dragon spacecraft are certified with NASA for up to 5 flights. We're working in partnership with NASA to increase that to many more. We've extended our life cycle qualification campaigns for all of our individual components, for most of our individual components, to 15 times. And so these are really great workhorse vehicles that we think can fly many times and support the manifest that we anticipate here in the coming decade.
All right, and our next question, and it looks like currently our final question right now in the queue, is from Marcia Smith at spacepolicyonline.com.
Thanks so much. I was wondering if Joel could say when the next the first HTV-X flight is scheduled for Space Station, and do you have a list of things that you're waiting to put on that larger vehicle? And then separately, I was going to ask about how you convey the results of all these experiments. This is to Dr. Costello, to the commercial companies that are building space stations and to the gateway people who are building a space station in terms of what they need to know about the kinds of foods they need to be able to grow on those space stations. How do you cooperate with those folks?
Yeah, good question, Marcia. Thank you. The HTV-X will debut in 2024. So we're working with our Japanese colleagues to debut that vehicle to the International Space Station in 2024. As far as the manifest, it's a little early to tell. We'll have a number of vehicles go into Space Station before that. So as we get into 2023, we'll start doing detailed planning for what we'll fly on the HTV-X vehicle. As standard, for any time you fly a first vehicle, you tend to not fly, one-of-a-kind hardware. We do that on, U.S. domestic vehicles. We do it on other foreign vehicles, but that's kind of the planning for that. And so we're excited to have that vehicle. It's going to be an awesome addition to the International Space Station, and we'll be looking forward to seeing this debut in 2024. I'll hand it over to Kirt for your other question.
Hi, Marcia. Thanks for the second part of your question as well. For ISS research results, these are all publicly available and maintained in our Space Station Research Explorer database, which is a publicly available database of not only all the research that we've done on Space Station, but there are links to the publications that those researchers have made as well. That is open to the public. It's open to all of our CLD partners and their chief scientists and science groups. We are also working through the CLDP program to come up with the set of requirements that we would be handing off to the CLDs as a services agreement in phase 2 of the competition. So those requirements are in work, but if we define needs for certain capabilities, they would be included in those requirements.
And our next question is from Ken Kramer at Space Up Close.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. And I guess for Sarah Walker, I had two questions. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the work you need to do on the Dragon? I couldn't quite hear what you were saying, more work you needed to do that caused this delay. And can you also talk a little bit more about extending the crew and cargo Dragons to more flights? What are you looking at? You said many more flights. I think there are 5 right now. What would you like to extend them to? How many flights? Thanks.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, so we were just monitoring the vehicle telemetry as we do throughout ground processing, and we noticed an elevated level of a certain constituent of fluorocarbon in the cabin. And so we started looking into it, determined it was fluid tech, which is a fluid that we use in our thermal control system. That's what keeps the cabin cool during the flight. And so we started looking into what could be causing this fluid to potentially leak out of our system, and found a joint that was not seated properly. There was a little rubber O-ring, a rubber seal that was damaged and not allowing the joint to close properly. So we took the rest of the fluid out of the line. We just opened and fixed that rubber seal, closed the joint back up, did a leak check with helium to make sure that it was a good, robust joint, and then we are currently underway with loading fluid to fill that loop back up. So almost done with the rework, and then Dragon will be rotated to horizontal, mated with the rocket, and we'll roll out this weekend. I think your other question was about additional flights. So
Right.
Just recently, NASA purchased 8 more flights from SpaceX to support the NASA Commercial Crew Program, and so that's exciting news for us. We love partnering with NASA, and we're excited to continue. And so that is great. And then I believe the NASA CRS program also, I think it was last year that they added 6 additional flights to their manifest. And so we're just using these newly contracted flights in addition to our best forecast at what the rest of the decade could look like to make sure that we have the right coverage with number of vehicles in the rotation.
But how many flights do you think you could do with each Dragon?
Oh, sorry, I misunderstood the question. About 15 flights is what we're targeting right now. There's a few caveats to that. There's certain soft goods or consumables that you swap out each time, and a couple hardware items that probably wouldn't fly 15 flights, maybe, say, parachutes, depending on the various factors that we analyze. Maybe that would be a lower flight count, but we basically work with our NASA counterparts to look at component by component or design unit by design unit on what that component is qualified to. And the vast majority of the capsule should be at 15 flights. And with a handful of components that you swap out every few.
Yeah, spectacular. That would be great. Thank you.
All right, and that was our final media question in the queue. So I think that's going to wrap things up for us here today. Once again, NASA's SpaceX CRS-26 mission is targeting launch at 3:54 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Tuesday, November 22nd, from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. We'll begin our live launch coverage at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on launch day. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day.
That concludes today's call. You may disconnect at this time. Host, please stand by for your post-conference.